Good morning, dear students. Welcome you all for your English class. Today we are going to discuss your first chapter, a lantern as big as a house. So, at first we need to discuss about a warm-up section. Here in this warm-up section, there mentions three festivals that are celebrated in China, Sri Lanka, and in Thailand. Lantern festival is celebrated in China. During that festival, children go out at night carrying paper lanterns and solve riddles on the lanterns. And the other festival which is mentioned here is the festival that is celebrated in Sri Lanka, and it is called Vesak. Colorful lanterns are hung along streets and in front of homes during Vesak. And the third festival which mentions here is Yipeng festival which is celebrated in Thailand. They celebrate this festival by releasing thousands of lighted lanterns to the sky. Introduction of the chapter. The festival of Vesak is celebrated in May in India and in Southeast Asia. It is celebrated in the honor of Gautama Buddha. All the people enjoy the festival by lighting the lanterns. They go to the temple to show their respect towards Buddha. Full moon shines on that special day, and when the sun sets in the evening, various colors of twinkling lanterns were lighted in homes. Vesak lanterns are very important during the festival. Here in the first paragraph mentions about Patya, who is the main character of the story, also planned to make a big lantern or huge lantern on the day of Vesak festival. So he collected bamboo strips to make the framework of the lantern. He had planned to make a lantern just like the same one he had seen in the city the previous year with his grandmother. He saw some lanterns as big as houses, which were so beautiful that he can't forget that sight. He wanted to celebrate the Vesak festival. Families worked together making small lanterns. When Patya started to make a huge lantern, his grandmother wondered about the size of the lantern because it was as big as a house. All the neighborhood came to watch the lantern made by Patya. When the neighborhood people came to watch the lantern made by Patya, they asked in great surprise that how he is going to hang the lantern as it was so big. Then Patya replied that he is going to leave the lantern standing there as it is. Patya finished the lantern framework 3 days before Vesak. He became very happy to see the lantern finished. But a sad thought struck in the mind of Patya. The lantern needs to be covered. It needs plenty of papers to cover it. They don't have enough papers to cover the lantern. He became very sad thinking about it. There formed tears in his eyes, and he expressed his unhappiness in front of his grandmother. Then she made a solution that and consoled him by saying that they can sell the sweet potatoes they cropped and buy a lot of papers using that money. On Sunday, Patya and Granny brought papers for decorating the lantern. Granny helped Patya to cut the paper and paste it on the lantern. There was not enough space in their house to put the lantern as it was that much big as their house. There were no more space to afford 2 persons with the lantern. So Granny sat inside the framework of the lantern and sat on the floor, and she cut down the papers sitting inside the lantern. Patya sat on a stool. No, he stood on a stool outside the framework and pasted the pieces of paper on the framework. Even in the sunset, the lantern was incomplete. They worked so hard to finish, but they couldn't finish the work of lantern in the night time also. Next morning, Patya and his grandmother went to the temple and joined in the ceremony with the other villagers. After praying, they returned back home. The day went very happily. There were Vesak decorations everywhere, swinging and dancing in the breeze. But Patya and grandmother have no time to spend there at the temple, and they walked back to home very fastly. After reaching home, they again started to work in the half finished framework of the lantern. By the noontime, lantern was in the finishing stage. Granny helped him by cutting paper flowers. Patya pasted those flowers outside of the lantern in the best way it looked. They have finished their lunch very fastly and started their work again. Patya sang song while working in the lantern. So they worked very easily and happily while cutting and pasting. Grandmother was cutting the papers and made lovely designs, and Patya fixed those outside of the lantern. So, Patya and grandmother worked so hard to make a finishing of the lantern till night. But that night looked so beautiful because of the brightness of Vesak decorations everywhere and lights in all directions. When the evening approached, there were full of sounds from the bell ringing from temples and the sounds of drums and all. Lanterns shone everywhere very brightly. At last, Patya and grandmother came at the finishing stage of the making of the lantern. Patya was very happy and he shouted with joy that he has finished the lantern. At last, the work of the lantern finished, but a strange thing happened that made the granny sad. Granny was sitting inside the framework of the lantern. When they finished the lantern, she was stuck inside the lantern as there was no way to come out of the lantern. Patya also became very sad, but grandmother made a solution that she had a box of matches with her and she told that she can light the candles sitting inside the lantern. Granny lit the candles sitting inside the lantern and lantern glowed very brightly. As the grandmother was sitting inside the lantern, it looked like a woman who was in deep meditation. Thus, the lantern made by Patya and his grandmother became a special one among the villagers. When Patya and his granny finished the big lantern, all the villagers visited to see that grand lantern. They became struck with surprise by the lovely sight of the speciality of the lantern, a glowing lantern with a meditating shadow within it. When the lantern began to dim, Granny tore open one side of the lantern and came out of it. At that time, our little Patya was sleeping peacefully beside the lantern with his face of contentment. The boy might be seeing the dreams of a lantern as big as a house. That's the end of the chapter, a lantern as big as a house. I think you are clear with the idea of the chapter. So it's better you go through the chapter many times. So thank you all. Thank you. Goodbye.